everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to this. I hope that we can provide some value to you today. So you want to know how to implement your design system in Liferay. I'm really excited because in this talk, we're finally going to definitively answer that question. You know, what is the best way to implement your design system? And the answer? It depends. All right. I know. But the rest of my talk will explain why it depends, what it depends on, and how it depends. So, still some things that I think will be of value. So, where are we going to go? So, first off, let's go ahead and stand up. That's going to be easier. So, the agenda for how we're going to talk about that is we're going to start off by looking at some of the new features in Liferay that will help you to implement your design system. And so a quick overview of that. There's too much information in this talk to really be able to go in depth on anything or fully. So of course the slides will be available and they include links to documentation, links to a GitHub repo that has examples as well that I'm going to be demoing in this. So don't worry, it's going to be a high level overview, but you have time to invest more later with the resources that are going to come. So first, what are the new features that you can use? Okay. Second, then, this is really the it depends part, right? Is how do your business requirements affect your implementation, right? Depending upon, what type of company you are, what type of project you're working on, it's going to change. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and try to give you a general idea of how to think through what to do based on what your requirements are. And then we'll do some simple examples, right? To try to kind of pull it all together and show you a little bit of how this might actually look in reality. Obviously, simple solutions, simple examples. It's not fully baked out, but get you in the right direction. So, new Liferay features that you can use for implementing your design system. So, not surprising, guys, this is actually a talk about client extensions. That's just what this conference is, right? But that's a good thing, remember, because client extensions provide so much value for you, right? A simpler API outside of Liferay makes upgrades easier, gives you more options when it comes to your tooling, what type of frameworks, what things you want to use. So it's a good thing that we're pushing this. But that's what we're talking about, basically. And one of the key things when we're talking about implementing our design systems is often most of what we're talking about you might have done previously using a war-style theme. And we don't want you to do that anymore. You've got lots of different ways to do that now. That's going to make it easier for you to upgrade because, actually, show of hands, anyone here found it painful to upgrade a theme from an old version of Liferay? Okay, and anyone who has their hands down, it's probably because they haven't had to do that yet. So moving to use client extensions instead of a theme is going to make it easier to stay up to date with the latest version of Liferay, which means you keep on getting new features. Everyone's happier, more value to you and your clients. So a good way to go. So first off, theme CSS client extension, right? So this allows you to replace the CSS that's provided by a traditional theme, right? That includes the main.css and the clay.css files, including as well right to left versions of that. In addition, one thing that the theme had that we didn't have available in client extensions for a long time, this was actually just announced on the main stage as well, is the front-end token definition. So right, that's where you can define your tokens that are then used by style books and by fragment configurations in order to make sure that you're using a consistent design system, right? Those tokens are being propagated throughout. You can change them on the fly in the browser, and that is now also available in the theme CSS client extension. Lots of documentation and examples of that. So one thing that we're going to talk about later on as well, with the theme CSS client extension, we don't always want to go to that, okay? There's going to be certain situations where we want to use that, but if you don't have to, don't. If you can use an out-of-the-box theme, if you can get away with doing less, that might be better off for you. And we'll talk about more about why that would be the case. The next thing, CSS client extension, okay? Sounds very similar, right? We just removed theme and now it's a different client extension. So the difference here is that while the theme CSS client extension allows you to replace the CSS provided by the theme, the CSS client extension allows you to add CSS on top of it. So it's a great option when there's not many things that need to change, but you just need to include a little bit extra. Maybe you've got a component that Liferay never considered, And so you want to include some CSS for that more globally. The CSS client extension allows you to provide that. Also, more generally, for most of these client extensions we're talking about right now, right, these are front-end type client extensions, which allow you to assign them to Liferay at different scopes. So you can assign it to the entire site via the page set, right? Assign it to all of your public pages of a site. You can also assign it via a page template. So for instance, the common route would be to assign it at a master page level, and then all pages built off the master page will inherit those client extensions assigned to it also. And for more one-off situations, right, you can also assign it at the page level. Also, just to be aware of the CSS client extension, one thing this also kind of relates to is it provides the ability to replace what we could do with OSGI modules before with a theme contributor, right? That's one way of adding CSS in a more global fashion that's additive as opposed to replacing. So if you used theme contributors before, the CSS client extension might be a good alternative to you. The JavaScript client extension. So not surprisingly, right, this lets you add additional JavaScript. There's no need for a theme JavaScript client extension because the default theme in Liferay doesn't provide any JavaScript, so there's nothing needed to replace. But if you need to add additional JavaScript, this is going to be the route to do it. And it's going to allow you to add a script tag at any of those scopes once again, so at the site level, or at the page template level, at the page level. And then additionally, we recently added a new scope for the JavaScript client extension, which is actually the company level. So if you want to have JavaScript run on every single page in a company, you're able to set that in the client extension.yaml file and allow that to be on every single page. So not just the pages that are created in Liferay, like the site pages, but also any of the admin control panel pages in Liferay. And this really relates more to how theme contributors worked in the past and allows you to make sure that something is always available no matter where you are in an entire instance. This can be really helpful in different situations, right? You've got a design system that maybe is that needs to load some JS for the components to work, and this will be a good way to contribute that. Closely tied together with the JS client extension, the JS import maps entry client extension. Right now, this is actually probably my favorite client extension. How many of you have actually used this one before? Okay, fewer. So that's exciting then, because this is going to be really powerful. So, and kind of separate but similar, how many of you are aware of just JavaScript import maps in general as a browser technology? Okay, a few more hands are aware of that. So basically, the browsers have evolved like crazy in the past few years. And one of the key things is the ability now for JavaScript modules in the browser to act as we're used to having them work in Node.js or at compile time with Webpack or whatever. Which means that we don't always have to actually compile all of our JavaScript into one single file in order to have it work. What we can actually do is we can keep our JavaScript, things that should be shared, as separate modules, and we can make those available in the browser and then dynamically import them when needed to be shared by different JavaScript components, which allows us to dynamically pull them in, but also it means that we only use them when we need to. And one amazing thing is we also don't ever load them more than once. So browser modules make sure that it's always deduped. So if you never import it on the page, it's never loaded. If you import it 20 times on the page, it's loaded once. And the import map client entry client extension makes it easier to do that because it allows you to define a bare specifier, so basically what the token is that you're going to import from, and point it to a URL, and then whenever you say import my utils in your JS, it's going to know to get that from the URL where that util.js is actually hosted. And so then you can share that across the board. The key for this is that it requires that your script element is of type module, which thankfully one of the updates we did recently to the JavaScript client extension is allowing you to define any attributes you want to add to the script tag that is going to be added to the page. So it's easy to simply say that So you can see this in script element attributes here. You can define what the attributes are, and those just get added to the script element on the page. So setting this as type module will allow you to import from the JavaScript import map entry client extension or import other JavaScript modules. So really powerful, highly recommend looking into this more for making it easier to share code. Really powerful as well. One of the things with the JS import maps entry client extension, if your design system already has a component library, say implemented in React, this is going to be a great example of that, right? You're going to want to make sure that all of those individual components are added to the JS import maps entry client extension so that they can be imported anywhere you need them in Liferay. So, for instance, one of the big things there is if you want to have a fragment that uses that. The JavaScript in a page fragment now is labeled as being type module, which allows you then to import other JavaScript modules. So you could import React, import React DOM, import whatever component you're using, instantiate that just in the JavaScript into the fragment element, and you're immediately then rendering a React type fragment with very little code, deduping the code. It's pretty amazing, at least to me. I really like this stuff. It's a lot of pains in the past that feel like they're getting solved now, so it's making me very, very happy. Some other client extensions, theme sprite map client extension, right? By default, a theme included the sprite map of clay icons. You don't need a theme anymore to change those or override them. We can simply add a theme sprite map client extension. One great thing as well is the samples that we have in the Liferay sample workspace do a really good job of showing a build process for how to keep the existing clay icons, but then override some, add additional ones, and make those all available. So that's going to make it really easy to customize all of the icons that are currently in Liferay, but also add additional ones if you have needs for that. The theme favicon client extension, pretty basic, just allows for, once again, a way to provide a favicon. So this is something that it's now not too hard in Liferay in general, whereas if any of you have been working Liferay for a long time, which based on the stats from earlier that you all have, that was really painful in the past, but really quite straightforward these days. The other thing that's really important now for building out your design system is master pages. Remember, we're wanting to move away from what we did with the themes in the past. So before, right, when we're talking about templating, you got headers, you have footers. That would have been all in your Portal normal, different templates in your theme. But that's actually probably one of the key areas where you had pain when it comes to upgrading, because templating languages change, the injected variables are different, there's this change, and it's a headache, and then trying to debug FreeMarker is not fun. That's an understatement. And so instead of having basically your overall layout handled by the theme, we now want to put that in a master page, right? Where you're able to use the content page editor to be defining that. You're able to have the headers and footers be built using page fragments, right? Which we already know adds so much more value since we're actually just building reusable components, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, configurations. It makes it so much nicer. So master pages are definitely a preferable route over building it directly in your theme. Page fragments, of course, essential not just for building the master pages, but building everything else as well. And since you've got a lot of flexibility in terms of modifying your markup when it comes to page fragments, you've got the ability to map from content or from backend content in Liferay, right? This is really powerful because one of the things when you're thinking about implementing your design system is, okay, how do I control the markup? Because my design system likely is opinionated about the HTML if you have an implementation of it. And so page fragments will let you do that. If you then are using Liferay's objects, for instance, the backend, you're able to then render different types of forms and display pages using custom fragments that already use the markup that your design system expects, which means it's going to be styled correctly and have the correct behavior. So page fragments, super powerful to be able to manage that. And then one that you might not have expected, but the site initializer client extension. So this is going to allow you to programmatically create or update a site in Liferay, complete with adding different configurations and content and resources. And so this is important for design system because it's going to let you to, it's going to replace some of what we did with the theme. So with the theme, right, the advantage is that all of the templates and all of the resources, it's all compiled in one big war. And so it's easy to make changes to that and then on dev, then put it on UAT, and then eventually propagate it to production. But what we talked about here was a lot of different small pieces, and if we're trying to put all that together, it's going to be a bit of a pain to try to propagate that between different environments. It's a lot of manual configuration. And so using the site initializer client extension is going to allow you to make all of those changes in code so that you can test it in your dev environment and then deploy that to UAT and then deploy it to production. And since it's not only for creating a site once, but also for updating the site, that means that as you're rolling out new changes or updates, you can once again be using this to propagate these changes to different environments. And so that's really helpful for being able to manage it in a much more streamlined and DevOps fashion. All right, so part 2, right? How do your business requirements affect your implementation? So a number of diagnostic questions that will kind of help us think through this. So first off, what actually are your design requirements, right? Do you require a pixel perfect design? Is it really stringent where everything has been perfectly laid out for you in terms of nothing is left up to what the components actually look like out of the box? Or is it just really, no, we need to just kind of rebrand it, right? I mean, if it's a portal, maybe more flexible. If it's an intranet, more flexible. But if it's a marketing site, it's going to be much more stringent, right? Do you have an existing design system? So are you coming into this project already having something designed for you, but even is it actually already implemented? Do you have a component library? That's going to affect what's going to be the most efficient way for you to build something out, right? And then also, what Liferay features does your project actually need? So, are there any Liferay widgets that are a requirement for your project that need to be restyled? Some Liferay widgets, right, that's not too difficult. We've got ADTs, and so we can even change the markup for them. Other Liferay widgets, that's much more difficult. And so understanding what it is, what your requirements are, is going to have a huge effect. If you're building everything with objects, for instance, then you've got a huge flexibility in terms of what markup you can use. You can use an existing component library. The example actually I was going to give is no longer helpful. Thankfully, it's because Liferay has had huge improvements, right? Commerce used to be difficult to restyle because you needed so many out-of-the-box widgets that looked a certain way, and you had certain limitations on how you could change the HTML. But now with Commerce actually moving so much to using page fragments, using the info framework and everything, that's not as true. So it's now much easier to have Commerce actually use the HTML from your design system's existing implementation that it would have been in the past. But these questions are going to affect what approach is going to be most efficient for you. So this is oversimplification, but roughly, if we were trying to think through what approach we should take, this is a simple decision tree to try to work through that. So, do you require pixel perfect designs? If the answer is no, then don't create a new theme CSS client extension. Use an out-of-the-box theme and just try to customize with stylebooks and master pages and page fragments. Take the easiest path, right? Less invasive when possible. Right? If it's not pixel perfect, just rebranding, hopefully this should be enough. And GS has done a lot with this approach and highly recommended it. If you do require pixel perfect, then we got to ask another question. Do you require Liferay widgets whose markup is not changeable? Okay. If yes, then the best route for you to take is going to be building a theme CSS client extension that customizes Clay CSS using Clay's Sass variables. And so that's going to allow you to not add additional CSS on top of everything in Liferay. It's going to allow you to actually modify the CSS that's printed out and change it through an API that's going to be more standard and stable over the long term and automatically restyle basically everything in Liferay. So that's going to be a better approach if you have to use existing Liferay features. If not, then we've got to ask the other question, right? Do you already have an implementation of your design system? So if you don't, once again, you're working in Liferay, so it's probably best for you to go ahead and take the same route. Go ahead and customize Clay CSS, right? This is what we're building. We're providing value to you by working on this. We're making sure that our components are accessible. It means that we handle a lot of the effort for you. So if you go ahead and customize Clay CSS, you can use the Clay React components. You don't have to think about, is this feature going to be styled correctly or not in Liferay? It should work out of the box. So you have more flexibility long-term to take this approach as long as you haven't already invested in implementing your design system somewhere else. If you do have an implementation, then guess what? Use your design system. Use that implementation. And remember, we have all these different client extensions that will help you be able to do that. And we'll go over this a bit right in the demo as well. And finally, I'm also, right, if the answer is no, right, to having your own implementation or design system, there are still other options, right? Some people love other component libraries. If you really just want to do that and it follows this route, like, you can. I would still recommend going to use Clay because it's in Liferay. But if there's another reason why you want to do that, you totally can use any other component library. Like, that's going to be totally possible and much easier today than ever before in Liferay. All right, so example, let's take a look at the demo. Let's jump into this a bit more. Let me switch over and get this up. All right. Okay. So for the demo, I've built out a simple workspace, right, with a number of different client extensions out of the box that's going to help us go through that. So we're going to not look at all of the use cases entirely, but we're going to primarily look at what it would look like to customize Clay and some of the value provided from that, as well as what it looks like to implement your own design system. So for implementing your own design system, I went ahead and grabbed the GovUK design system, and using client extensions there, this is a very well-documented design system, resources readily available, and so implemented that in Liferay to take a look at what that might look like. So when it comes to actually implementing another design system or your own design system in Clay, a great example of that is the Dialect theme CSS, which is an existing theme in Liferay. But so in this case, then I moved that over to be a client extension. And the reason why is because it does a great job of showing how to extend or modify Clay using Clay's Sass variable API. So I highly recommend taking a look at this repo, looking at how this is organized, how we're overriding primarily the Clay variables, but then at times when we have to make little changes to different component HTML, we're doing that as well. And it's a great example of just kind of walking through that. We also now notice we're including the front-end token definition .json, so that means that we're able to include our own tokens in stylebooks and leverage that for any different customizations needed. One thing to kind of highlight is Dialect is a little bit unique when it comes to how it's using stylebooks and front-end token definitions. It has way more tokens than you would actually need for a normal implementation, because Dialect's goal is different than a normal theme, right? It's trying to allow you to change kind of everything so that it can meet not just one customer's use case, but maybe 100 customers' use cases. And so as a result, in your implementation for a single customer, you're not going to want to have nearly as many tokens as Dialect does. Dialect has, I think, over 1,000. You're probably going to only want to have maybe 20 or so, because it's what would need to change between, like, on the fly. If it doesn't need to change on the fly between different pages or between different sites, then it shouldn't be a token. It should just be a static Sass variable. Don't complicate it. So make things tokens that need to change on the fly. Leave them as just Sass variables that get compiled if it's going to be just one and done, basically. stay static. So for that, once again, right, I told you this is no longer applicable. I built out a commerce site using fragments and content pages and have an example of restyling that with dialect. But once again, we don't have to do it that way. This is using all the out-of-the-box commerce widgets. Thankfully, most of those we don't have to use now. We get to build out our commerce pages using page fragments, and I could not be more excited about the work they're doing there. It's really, really cool. But as an example, right, this is basically kind of copying over Minium and showing a bit of what that looks like. So in this case, right, because it's because we're using dialect, right, a theme CSS client extension, we've created a new master page for this, right? So we're able to add in different header components and fragments through the master page. We're able to set the theme CSS client extension as well. And so in this case, we're able to simply select the dialect theme CSS here and apply that. And then able to publish that and go ahead and check out the whole page and see if everything is working correctly. So right, because we're using dialect, right, that means that we've got all the style books to easily change the look and feel, just using style books and tokens and change everything. But because we are customizing it with Clay CSS, it means that out-of-the-box widgets, everything in general is working mostly as we need to out of the box. So that means that as you are working through adding different items to the cart, all of the out-of-the-box widgets should already be working as expected. Things are in general styled right. There might be some small changes that have to take place. Easy to make small changes either in your theme directly or in a CSS client extension and apply those. But if you want everything to be in general working as you like, customizing Clay is going to be the easier route if you don't want to have to change all the HTML. And that's another thing to remember too, right? You've basically got two different approaches if you are using out-of-the-box Liferay functionality. If you want to go with, you can either modify it with just CSS in order to have it match what your design system looks like, or you have the option, right, to modify the HTML so that your existing CSS can restyle it. It depends on each component, what's going to be easier or harder. In general, I think it's probably more straightforward to use Clay to restyle it, but that's a preference. So the more interesting one, though, I think, is looking at what it looks like to implement a separate design system, right? So we're using GovUK. It comes with all your own components, all their HTML. So what kind of does that look like? So for this one, I've got a couple different things going on here. So first off, we do have a theme CSS client extension. In this case, what we're doing here is a little different than I simplified the process just to get this working quickly. But what this initial CSS is doing is basically trying to remove as much of the CSS provided by a default theme from Clay and whatnot as possible without breaking anything. So this is actually copying what Marcos provided in a repo that he had. This is in our README as well, so you can look into that. But it's just trying to remove as much of Clay as possible, so try to reduce that CSS file size to make it faster, of course. And so basically, I'm not using theme CSS quite as normal. In that case, it's just trying to remove CSS that we don't need. And then because GovUK provides just one static CSS file that includes all their CSS, it was easier to add a separate CSS client extension just to add that on instead, instead of worrying about a more complex build process of taking compiled CSS and merging that with Sass. So that's why I have a separate CSS client extension here as well, just to add that additional CSS on. So this is just adding a static CSS file and placing that in there. We also then have global.js. So in order to add the JavaScript that all of their components need out of the box. And this is actually done two different ways. So once again, the GovUK has one file that includes all of their JS, and I'm using the JS import maps entry to make that available in case I need it in multiple locations. And so in this case, right, it's just including that one file. The client extension.yaml is simply making that available with the bare specifier GovUK. And so that means that in my global JS, which I then am having loaded on every page, this is too slow. Let me switch over to VS Code. So for the global JS, so right, remember, because we want to use a JavaScript module, I've got to make sure that I've added type module so that I can import other JavaScript modules. So then it goes in my global JS. All I have to do then is just simply import govuk, and it's got a function init_all, and then simply run that. In this case, I've got a little bit extra work here, right? So in order to handle Liferay's SPA stuff, so one thing here, right, is it expects me to add a class name to the body once I know it's loaded, and then to call init_all. And I have to do that once when I load the portlet, but then also, right, when there's a non-full page navigation, right, with Liferay's SPA framework, I also have to call init in that case as well. So there's two different things going on here to kind of manage that. The other things that we're providing as well then is lots of fragments, right? So page fragments are going to be super helpful in master pages. And so that's all being provided by a site initializer. So in this case, I've got a bunch of different fragments available out of the box. These are normal as what you'd expect, right? Nothing special here, but just examples that we can use for that, as well as then master pages and some different settings for the whole site. So if we go over to, we've already set this up locally. So if I switch over to the govuk site, we'll end up seeing that we've got a page template here. So the govuk master page, this is already built out with having the header. It's got a navigation menu here, but you can't actually see it because there's no pages yet built. So it's collapsed a bit. And it's also then got the different theme CSS, CSS, and JS client extensions applied to it. So and all of this, right, is handled by the master or by the site initializer. So it's ready to go, easy to propagate these changes right to different environments. So you can see the theme CSS, the global CS applied here, in the JavaScript. And so I've chosen to add this via the master page, but you could be doing it to the layout set to the entire site as well. So if we go ahead and come back to our site builder and add a new page off the govuk master page, nice and fast. It's always the demo gods, right? All right, so it created but got stalled. Let's just try this again. There we go. Okay, so all of my govuk fragments, right, they're automatically added to the site by the site initializer. And so, for instance, in this case, I've got an accordion. So I'm able to define how many items I want. So 2 items only. I'm using inline editable content as well, right? So why should you come to Devcon? Right. And then I can go ahead and publish that. And, oh, that's right, because I've got 2 home pages because one didn't create correctly. So let's delete that. There we go. And so then this is loaded then, right? It's got all of the govuk styling and automatically working then with page fragments, right? So we're bringing all that in. It's got the functionality using govuk's styles, their HTML, their JS, right? All is working right there. But something maybe a little bit more complex, right? So let's talk about using a form, right? So in this case, right, we're connecting to Liferay objects, right, would be the thing. So once again, right, if you've used Liferay objects and with fragments, we've got our form container. We had that. I already added, so I have actually one other client extension we didn't talk about yet, which is a batch client extension, which all I'm using that for is just to add a default object definition. But also, the batch client extension's really helpful. So nice. So adding that in so it's ready for me here. Just a simple sign up form, able to select which form fields you want to use. And these out-of-the-box form inputs actually don't match govuk at all. So I don't want that. That does not look right. So I want to use the GovUK ones. So in this case, I've created GovUK text input, right? So we'll add that in, as well as we've got the GovUK form button that we can use so that we properly match that styling. And then let's delete these other ones. And duplicate this. And we have to map these right to our fields. So to name and a favorite color. And this is ready to go. We can publish that. So our form is set up here. So Evan, my favorite color is blue. Of course, we've got to actually display this somewhere. So go ahead and create a new page and quickly display that. But notice form inputs right, fully matching the design system as well. Once again, creating fragments for that to have pixel perfect matching your design system using your components. Really powerful. So let's see. I think that's actually mostly it. We've only got 5 minutes left. Wanted a little bit of time for questions. So I think we'll leave it there. And also here's a QR code and a quick link to the GitHub repo, which also includes the presentation in there as well. So any questions?
I'm coming over so that we have it on the recording.
Hello, great presentation. I learned really a lot. One question: why did you create new fragments for the form elements instead of restyling the original Liferay ones?
Yeah. So most often, right, a design system is going to actually have their own form elements, right? They're going to have certain classes and inputs that automatically style it. And so if you're using an existing design system, you don't want to have to add additional styling. Like that means that if GovUK changes it, I have to actually manually apply those styles to Liferay's form inputs. The benefit of using fragments is the fact that I can create my own form fragments. And so I can create a form fragment that uses the HTML that GovUK expects, which means if they add a fix to their CSS, I simply get the new version and apply it, and it's working correctly. So basically, if you have a design system that has an implementation, using that as much as possible is probably going to be the best route. As long as you don't require, right, it's the decision tree, as long as you don't require out-of-the-box widgets that can't be restyled.
Yeah, because we were trying to do something similar in the recent project, and the biggest issue we had with restyling rifle components was not about the widgets, but for the new fragments, for example, for the filtered collections, right? Mm-hmm. All these filters. So that was a big pain, and I was thinking, should we try to restyle it, or maybe should we create some fragment that will have the same functionality instead? I don't know what would you recommend in this case?
Yeah, so you're talking about, so there's the collection fragment, right, that lets you, yeah, and then there's filters along with that as well. So those ones I haven't looked into as deeply right now. I would say, yeah, check to see if you can modify the HTML directly. If not, I would say add a feature request to be able to create custom fragments like that. There's a huge amount of value to allow us to create any type of out-of-the-box fragment custom. It's not very helpful to have out-of-the-box fragments that we can't duplicate and then make our own version of. So it's a good opportunity for a feature request if that's not currently possible. Yeah, Dave?
Yeah, for estimation purposes, approaching a system like GovUK, how long would it take a new person to Liferay to create those client extensions and get it all working the way you have it?
Yeah, so the way that I set it up is a little bit simplified, right? Because I'm not using like Webpack to build this, using the NPM modules provided by GovUK. So I took a little bit more of a simplified approach to get this working quicker. And that's the reason for that is because I'm not as proficient with Webpack. Like I'm better with Liferay. With Liferay though, that's super straightforward, right? It's just setting up a file in the client extension, modifying the sample, and that's about as easy as could be. It's actually, the less you know of Liferay, maybe the better for that, because the samples are even using Webpack to try to show how to do that. So I would say extremely simple and straightforward. Very little Liferay knowledge needed. The main Liferay knowledge is just knowing what the features are. And so that's one of the goals of this presentation, right, is to get people more aware of what the features are so they can do even cooler things than we're doing right now.
Perfect. We have an upcoming 30 minutes coffee break. So remember how Evan looks like if you have more questions. And I guess best is you can catch him up front here. 30 minutes coffee break, and then we'll continue at 11:30.
Yep. Thanks so much.